listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a relationship coach, and I help people who are engaging in anything they think counts as infidelity to deal with their feelings, clarify what they want, and make decisions about what they're going to do. No shame, no blame, no judgments. Infidelity situations can seem very confusing and overwhelming in so many different ways for so many different reasons. And when we're in an infidelity situation, it can be really easy to get lost in our own unhelpful patterns of thinking. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can deal with your own unhelpful patterns of thinking. But one of the greatest things about working with a coach is that a good coach can help you get out of your unhelpful patterns of thinking a lot more efficiently than you can on your own. If you are ready to get unstuck, if you are ready to start thinking about your infidelity situation in a different way, let's work together. You can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. I offer confidential, compassionate coaching via Zoom, which means we can work together no matter where you're located. Okay, one of the great things about being human is that we have these very sophisticated, fancy brains that are capable of doing all sorts of things for us. Our minds, which are enabled by the biological organism that is our brain, are these really powerful machines, if you will. And when we put them into use in the right ways, they can do really amazing things for us. But so often, we let our minds run wild and have their wicked way with us. Ever heard the saying, the mind makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master? I'm pretty sure I offered you this quote in a fairly recent episode of this podcast, actually. I think I did. That line is attributed to Robin Sharma, but the idea is a very old one. Here's another very old comment on the nature of our minds. The mind is like a drunken monkey that has been stung by a scorpion and spooked by a ghost, right? We tend to think that our minds are these reliable masters, but they really aren't. They're these wild beasts that kind of do whatever they want, and we don't even know it. And since we think our minds are helpful or are sane masters, we tend to let our minds run the show for us. And what that often means is we don't relate to things we are concerned about in a particularly productive way. If something is going on in our lives that we want to address, we worry quite often. And we may entertain multiple worries at the same time. Maybe lots and lots of worries at the same time. And instead of slowing down and systematically addressing whatever it is we're concerned about, we may jump from topic to topic in our mind or engage in catastrophic thinking or attempt to solve big, complex problems in one fell swoop. Or we may do all of the things I just mentioned and probably even simultaneously, right? Good times. These are common, normal, so to speak, mental tendencies. There's nothing wrong with you if you've been thinking in any of these ways, if your mind has been doing any of these kinds of things. But the problem with these ways of thinking is that they are not terribly helpful. If you want to actually solve a problem, worrying is not going to help you do it. Letting your mind jump from topic to topic isn't going to help you do it, and neither will considering worst case scenarios in an indulgent way or attempting to figure everything out all at once. A big part of what I help people do as a coach is help people manage and organize their thinking. I can't do this for you, but I can teach you how to do it. And with practice, you can become adept at managing your mind. And this will help you deal with your infidelity situation and enhance your overall quality of life considerably. An unmanaged mind can be a source of great stress and suffering. When we learn how to manage our minds and we do it regularly, life gets a whole lot simpler and a whole lot better. That's not to say that we never experience any kind of discomfort. No way. But we can minimize our suffering and struggling considerably, which is amazing. Learning how to manage our minds is a process that consists of different specific practices. One element of managing our minds is becoming aware of what we are thinking about. This sounds simple, and it is, but it's incredibly important. So often we aren't really aware of what we're thinking. If an idea has floated through our minds, we may regard it as some sort of truth or as some sort of helpful or important bit of information that we need to pay attention to. But folks who have studied the brain and observed the mind tell us that many of the thoughts we think are not necessarily true and are not necessarily useful or even important for us to think about. However, that doesn't stop us from getting hooked into some very unhelpful patterns of thinking. We can easily get in the habit of, say, thinking about hypothetical worst-case scenarios of how our infidelity situation might unfold, and we can convince ourselves that doing this, that thinking this way, is really important and really productive. It's useful to recognize that there may be both biological and social reasons why we're likely to do this. Our brains, as biological organs, evolved to keep us safe from danger by identifying threats and helping us figure out what to do about them. Even if we aren't hardwired to worry or destined to worry, we certainly have the biological capacity to worry. Our brains have the capacity to think scary thoughts and put those thoughts on auto repeat. And in addition to this biological capacity, society provides plenty of messages that tell us that there are things we should worry about and that there is value in worrying. So we often get the message that if we aren't concerned about something or downright terrified of something, we're doing something wrong. We're sometimes told that we're being irresponsible or worse if we're not worried about things we should, quote unquote, be worried about. So we can all be forgiven for getting into the habit of thinking about the most catastrophic scenarios that could arise out of our infidelity situation or any other situation in our life for that matter, and attempting to figure out, perhaps obsessively, how we would handle such hypothetical eventualities. But here are the questions I want to ask you today. Is it helping you to worry about whatever you've been worrying about? Is running through worst-case scenarios over and over again doing anything useful for you? And if you think that doing these things has been helping you or has been useful, can you identify how specifically they've been helpful or useful for you? I'm willing to bet that worrying and engaging in catastrophic thinking has not served any truly useful purpose for you. Here's a really fucked up thing to be aware of. If we're in the habit of worrying or thinking about problems or quote unquote problems in unproductive ways, our minds will find comfort in this mode of thinking. If we are used to worrying, if it's familiar to us to worry, it may feel good in a sense to keep worrying, even if it also doesn't really feel all that good. Familiar discomfort can be really comfortable in its own way. And so we may find ourselves in this weird catch-22. On the one hand, worrying doesn't help us. And in fact, it may have some consequences for us that we really don't like. But on the other hand, we may not know how to stop worrying. And it may really seem like the world will fall apart if we dare to even try to not worry about something or everything. Crazy, right? I know. Our minds are interesting things. We may truly believe that worrying or ruminating is helpful or necessary, even if we can't identify any actual benefits we're getting out of doing it, right? And I want to make it really clear that intentional, deliberate, solution-focused problem solving is important. It's important to allow ourselves to acknowledge things that we think are problems, decide if they are truly problems or not, and then decide systematically and deliberately how we're going to deal with them. So I want to make it really clear that I'm not suggesting that you need to convince yourself that the things you're worried about aren't important. The point is not that you need to talk yourself out of your concerns or attempt to ignore them. Rather, the point is that we can learn how to engage with our concerns or our problems or our supposed problems in a deliberate and intentional way. What we often do when we think we have a big, complicated, difficult situation on our hands is freak out effectively. We do things like tell ourselves that our situation is complicated and overwhelming and difficult. And if we start to tell ourselves that, we may believe it. And this can really get in the way of actually addressing our situation systematically and deliberately, one step at a time. Instead, we may attempt to boil the ocean in a teacup, so to speak. And when that doesn't work, we take it as proof that our situation is even more difficult and complicated than we originally thought it was. So we worry and freak out some more. Awful, right? If you've been there, you know how excruciating this is. So, one of the things that is incredibly beneficial to do when we're stuck in a cycle of unproductive worrying is this: deliberately decide to stop engaging with our worries. Now, to reiterate, I'm not suggesting that you effectively brainwash yourself or suggesting that you should try to convince yourself that something you're concerned about isn't actually a problem. There may be times when you do change your mind and decide that something you thought was a problem isn't actually a problem. That's a thing for sure, but that isn't what I'm talking about right now. What I want to underscore right now is that you don't have to actively engage with everything you're worried about during every single waking minute. You can deliberately and intentionally set your worries down for a while. And there is much to be gained from doing this. Most immediately, if we can take a break from catastrophic thinking and worrying, we can find relief and feel better. And there is value in that alone. Also, when we find relief, when we occupy a less cluttered and distressed mental state, we're much more able to think about our situation in a way that is actually productive. As you may have heard me say before, when emotion is high, intelligence is low. We may think that worrying helps us solve problems, but the opposite is usually true. So how do we take a break from worrying when it seems like we literally cannot stop? First, consider that it is possible for us to learn how to manage our minds instead of letting our minds have their way with us. It does take effort and practice to do this, but deciding that it is possible to learn how to be in charge of our own minds is an important first step. Second, stop what you're doing and write down everything you are worrying about. Obviously, if you're listening to this while you're driving, you don't want to write and drive, or at least I don't want you to write and drive. But seriously, make time today to write down what you are worrying about. Get those thoughts out of your mind and onto some external medium. Third, once you've got all of your worries written down in front of you, ask yourself whether it's helping you in a clearly identifiable way to worry about each of the items on your list. go through and ask yourself that question about every single worry you have listed. Now, spoiler alert, it probably isn't helping you to worry about any of these items, but I really want you to do this exercise anyway. If worrying about any of the items you have listed is truly helping you, by all means, keep worrying. But if worrying about any of the items on your list is not helping you, proceed to step number 4. Step number 4 is this. Ask yourself if you would be willing to stop worrying about each worry or any of the worries on your list for the rest of this day. Now, I'm dead serious about this, and I've phrased this instruction very deliberately. I'm not suggesting that you tell yourself to stop worrying or tell yourself that you shouldn't be thinking about the things you're worrying about. I'm asking you to actually have a discussion about this with yourself and to effectively have a conversation with your own mind. You can imagine yourself approaching your own mind as a partner and saying, "Hey there, I've been observing what you've been doing, and it doesn't seem to be helping me very much. So I'd really like to see if you'd be willing to take a break from worrying, that is." Here's the thing. Your mind may not want to take a break. Your mind may want to just keep worrying because it thinks that worrying is helpful and it's gotten very good at doing this particular job. And it likes to have a job and be good at it. But you have just begun to assume a new relationship with your mind. You have just appointed yourself manager of your mind instead of employee of your mind. You've given yourself a promotion. Your mind may not be fully on board with this change, and in fact, it may not even be aware of this change, so it may not instantly cooperate. But you can still be resolute in occupying your new role. Your mind is allowed to want to worry, but that doesn't mean you just have to let it, right? So here's the thing. Managing our minds requires us to be firm and gentle managers. If you ask your mind, "Hey, can we stop worrying about this particular thing just for the rest of the day?" and your mind puts up a big fight, you may not be able to force it to do your bidding. Totally normal. You may want to offer a bargain. You could say to your mind, "Hey, if we don't worry about this today, we can always worry about it again tomorrow if we want to." How does that sound? That kind of discussion may help you and your mind loosen the grip on the need to worry. We can't bully ourselves out of worrying or bully ourselves out of any particular thought pattern, but we can gently and firmly guide ourselves and negotiate ourselves into new ways of thinking. Now, step 5. If your mind says yes, we agree to stop worrying about this particular thing for the rest of the day, your next opportunity is to put that plan into action. And here's the thing. Even if we decide we're going to stop worrying about something, we may worry about it anyway. If our mind is in the habit of ruminating on something a lot, we may just go there automatically. And this is not a problem. You don't have to banish thoughts of worry the second they arise or try to prevent them from arising in the first place. What you want to start to practice is not getting invested in the thoughts of worry when they do come up. Your practice is to not getting sucked into engaging with them. Your practice is to not give them your focus and attention if they arise. Practice is the operative word here. It takes willingness and practice and effort and dedication to create new mental habits. And that's not a problem, and it's totally worth the effort, right? It can be helpful to know that this is going to take practice before you try to do it and find that it doesn't work out perfectly on the first try. One of the metaphors that I like to use when I talk to clients about managing their minds is this. If we're running a meeting at our workplace and we're new to the job, and a lot of the people at the meeting we're running are very opinionated, we have to be ready to keep our meeting agenda on track without letting a bunch of other people derail us. We are the boss, after all. It is our meeting. Yes, the other people get to be there, and they even get to speak up. But when people start voicing ideas that are totally off topic or are completely unhelpful or are downright crazy and rude, we are totally within our rights to say, okay, thanks for that contribution, but we're not going to explore that any further right now. And we may have to keep saying that over and over again. Sometimes in actual meetings, none of the meeting attendees want to stay on task. Maybe they're all preoccupied with something else. Maybe they're all in a bad mood. Maybe they're all sharing this ridiculous inside joke. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're hungover. Maybe they all had cocktails for lunch. Whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter why our meeting attendees aren't focused on the subject at hand. Our job is just to keep the meeting agenda on track. And so it is with our thoughts. Our minds can offer us all kinds of thoughts all day, every day. But we don't have to just stand back and get overwhelmed by the onslaught. We get to decide which thoughts we are going to pay attention to. We get to decide which thoughts we are not going to pay attention to. Handling our thoughts in an intentional way may take practice, but it is possible. So if you decide that it is not helpful for you to worry about something today, and that worry comes up, you can simply notice that that thought entered your mind, and you can let it be there without giving it your full attention. Yes, the thought may nag at you a little bit, or more than a little bit. Yes, thinking that thought may generate some discomfort, but you don't have to let it totally derail you, right? It's just like when there's somebody at the meeting at work that really, really, really wants to say their piece. And you're like, okay, I know you have things to say, but guess what? We're just not going to talk about that right now. Maybe we'll talk about that in next week's meeting, right? Maybe we'll talk about that never. Maybe we can schedule a private conference for later on or something like that. The point is you don't have to let the loud person have the floor. You don't have to let the loud thoughts in your mind take over your mental space. Now, here's an example of what this can look like in practice. Sometimes folks who are engaging in some sort of infidelity behavior get obsessed with the possibility they might get caught cheating. They don't want to get caught for all kinds of reasons, and they start to think about how bad it would be if they were to get caught. And all of this thinking creates a lot of intensely unpleasant emotions. And these emotions start to seem like evidence that they are indeed at risk of getting caught. So they start to panic and they get really paranoid. And then the whole thing becomes rather miserable. Here's the deal. If you're concerned about getting caught cheating, there might be things you want to do to prevent this from happening, or at least reduce the likelihood of this happening. Thinking pragmatically about how you can effectively address a particular problem or situation is problem solving. Ruminating about the possibility that something might happen and worrying about what it would be like if it did is not problem solving. Now, when I talk to people about this, they sometimes say, yeah, well, that's great, but there's only so much I can do to avoid getting caught. So therefore, I can't help but worry about the possibility of getting caught. Interesting logic there. Here's the deal, you guys. Getting caught is an occupational hazard of cheating. Beyond taking the actions you can take to reduce your risk of getting caught, you may have only one other choice: stop cheating or learn how to manage your worries. If the possibility of getting caught cheating is totally unappealing to you, you could decide to solve the problem by putting an end to the cheating. But some people don't want to do that or don't want to do that right away, and I'm completely sympathetic to that. But here's the thing. You can manage your worries about getting caught if you want to. You are not powerless over your anxieties or your catastrophic thinking or your tendency to worry or ruminate. And this is so important to be aware of because we usually need to reduce our worrying in order to resolve an infidelity situation in a way that's truly right for us. We may think that engaging in catastrophic thinking or just a lot of worrying is going to help us figure out what to do, but it rarely works out that way. Now, again, some people say to me, well, I'm doing something that I really don't feel good about, so how can I not worry and freak out? The short answer to that question is that even if you don't feel 100% amazing about what you're doing, you don't have to obsess about what you're doing wrong, quote unquote, or what you're doing that you don't like doing. You can hold yourself accountable for your behavior without freaking out about how bad it is or how bad you are or whatever your specific worries are. Some people are afraid that if they stop worrying, they'll let themselves off the hook and then they won't make any changes. But relief from worrying is usually exactly what we need, in part at least, in order to make changes. But you don't have to take my word for it. Try this out for yourself and see what happens. So, just to recap a very important point. Intentional, deliberate, solution-focused problem solving is one thing. Indulging in worrying, catastrophic thinking, trying to figure everything out all at once is a totally different thing. Can you take a break from your catastrophic thinking today? Is there anything that you could not worry about today? You can always resume worrying tomorrow if you want to. Just see if you can give yourself a little respite today. Remember, if worrying has become a habit for us, it will take time and effort to shift that habit. But this doesn't have to be a daunting or onerous process, even if it isn't an instantaneous transformation. And of course, learning how to manage our minds more effectively, learning how to relate to our worries differently is a skill that applies to every area of our lives, not just our infidelity situations. But if you're not yet in the habit of relating to your mind as the servant rather than the master, your infidelity situation presents an excellent opportunity to learn how to assume this role. And of course, if you want to get serious about managing your mind and sorting out your infidelity situation, I can help you do it. I know how excruciating it can be to get stuck in bottomless pits of worry and endless loops of catastrophic thinking, and I can promise you that there is relief to be found from these kinds of thought patterns. In addition to that, no matter how confounding your infidelity situation may seem, it is possible to sort it out one step at a time in a way that is truly right for you. Your situation may seem impossible, but I promise you that it isn't. So if you're ready to get started on that process, I can help you do it. And the first step is to schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. You can also learn more about the coaching packages I offer and my current pricing on the services page of my website. All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for listening. I wish you an excellent week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.